yesterday. Doug Peterson spoke. We got a lot of those quotes to play. We heard from Jeffrey Lurie yesterday. We didn't talk a lot about the Peterson stuff yesterday because the Lurie stuff was the night before. John McMullen joins us now, 97.3 ESPN.com. Also covers the league nationally at FanRag Sports NFL. And you can check him out on Twitter at JF McMullen. And he joins us now with our mandatory look at the NFL. Johnny Mac, what's happening? Well, you had Josh over there in 6s and 7s. He was like bowled over laughing. What'd you tell him?
Well, we were talking about Doug Peterson comparing himself to Nick Foles, and what an insult that was for Nick, because Nick's a pretty good backup quarterback. But Doug is a smart man, but he wasn't that talented as an NFL quarterback.
No, he wasn't. Those what was it? 8 games he played for the Eagles were very painful.
Yes, they were. And that I could just imagine Nick Foles hearing that being compared to Doug Peterson. He's like, "Yeah, come on."
I was once just like you.
I have that.
Right. I was once just like you. No, you weren't. Nor was Chase Daniels, by the way. Chase Daniels wasn't just once like me either. All right, we got a lot to dive into here. Doug Peterson, who spoke, of course, a lot to kind of digest as he did that yesterday. And yesterday we had kind of been going over the Lurie stuff because he spoke the night before. But a couple things I want to get your opinion on from Doug Peterson's. What did he talk for, an hour and 20 minutes yesterday? I mean, a lot of that is him stuttering through, but still, an hour and 20 minutes that he sat at the round table. He talked about, let's start with his thoughts on Alshon Jeffrey and how his presence will help the other wide receivers out there.
Well, first, real quick, the coach's breakfast, you're required to speak for an hour. So
really?
Everybody's got to be out there. Yeah, it's sort of like going to the dentist every year for NFL coaches. They're not exactly thrilled with it, but they suffer through it. And Doug obviously is nicer with his time than most coaches, so he'll even go over. But he does stutter and stammer and a lot, and I've talked about that in the past. You know, he's very honest and very engaging, but there are certain things he can't talk about. And I've often said, you know, what do you want? Do you want a guy who's really, really well-versed in coming up with quips like Chip Kelly, or do you want the guy who's going to be honest with you? I've always advocated the latter, and that's what Doug is. But getting to Alshon Jeffrey now, yeah, I mean, look, this guy is such an upgrade for the Eagles at that particular position. You can't even speak to how much he will mean to Carson Wentz just as a security blanket, and the fact that he's the type of receiver you can just throw the football up and he's going to go get it. And if he doesn't catch it, he's going to knock it down. He's not going to let the defensive back get it. So having a guy like that on this team is a huge step forward, and I think everyone understands that from Doug Peterson on down.
Hey, John, what does adding Jeffrey and then Smith and then with Matthews, what does that all mean for Nelson Agholor?
Well, special teams, which is, you never want to hear special teams with a former first-round pick. But as things shape up now, if you're the fourth or fifth receiver on an NFL team, you have to have an impact on special teams. And remember, the Eagles will need a kick returner. I think Nelson will figure into that. Obviously, Darren Sproles is still around to return punts, so that's not a concern. But even coverage teams. I mean, if he wants a place on this team and he wants to be involved, unless something changes, he's going to have to get involved on special teams. And by the way, I still think there's still an outside chance that the Eagles might look to move Jordan Matthews. I really do. And if that's the case, all of a sudden, then you could have Nelson Agholor trying to maybe fit in as a slot receiver. But more likely than not, he's just a special teams player at this point.
Yeah, and the Jordan Matthews, your comment there sort of colors my next question, which is we all know that it costs more to cut Nelson Agholor than to keep him, but do you honestly think that he's in danger of not making the football team?
No, I don't, for that reason. And I think he does shape up, if you look at Dorial Green Beckham, for instance, I mean, he's a guy who can't help you on special teams, just can't. There's nothing he can do to help in that phase of the game, whereas Nelson at least projects to where he can do some things. He is I think he will be in the mix for kick returner. I think he will be, one of the backup punt returners, and he is capable of playing on some of the coverage units, whereas DGB isn't able to do that. So I don't think he's in any danger of losing his roster spot, partially because of that contract. Now, when we talk about this next year, it's almost a guarantee he's not going to be on the Eagles.
So what's DGB's future then, if you say that all these receivers are coming in? Where does DGB fit in?
Well, I think that there's a guy who's in danger of losing his roster spot because he can contribute. So if he's not going to be your fourth receiver and pushing for you to be your third receiver, he's going to get cut because he's not capable of helping you out in other areas. And so right now, as it stands for him, he's definitely a bubble player. And the Eagles are going to have to see some significant improvement come training camp for him to make this football team.
John McMullen's with us, 97.3 ESPN.com, covers the Birds and nationally covers the NFL for FanRag Sports NFL. A lot that Peterson really, divulged yesterday in terms of the wide receivers that we just talked about. And you mentioned Jordan Matthews. I agree. I think there is a shot because at 14, I think there might be a receiver on the board that they might like. And I don't know that you could play Torrey Smith, Alshon Jeffrey, and Jordan Matthews and then expect a rookie to come in and get some time. They would probably want 14 to come in and make an impact right away, and they probably feel that they can get some sort of value in return for Jordan Matthews. So I agree with you, John. If the right deal's there, they would move him, but it sounds like it would be a draft day deal in the event that someone's on the board at 14 that they like.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, whoever they pick at 14, and whatever position it is, whether it's cornerback, running back, wide receiver, edge rusher would be the main four positions you look at. They expect that guy to come in and be an impact player right away. So if it happens to be a wide receiver, yeah, I mean, he's going to play, and he's going to play immediately. And that obviously would push somebody else out of the equation, whether it would be Torrey Smith or Jordan Matthews. Obviously, it's not going to be Alshon Jeffrey. So, yeah, I mean, if they feel that the wide receiver is the best guy on the board at 14, that's a very ominous sign for one of those two players, certainly. And Torrey Smith, even though obviously he's a big free agent pickup, and I put that in quotes, the Eagles didn't invest much into him. He's really just a glorified one-year signing. So if they think John Ross, for instance, is a tremendous value, Torrey Smith is going to be out the door essentially before he even gets a chance to play.
Yeah, that's something, by the way, that John Clayton wrote about at ESPN.com, is that he could kind of be a one-and-done guy based on that contract, that Torrey Smith comes in, doesn't fulfill the home run promise that the Eagles obviously see from him. I mean, his name came up at the trade deadline. They think that he could be that guy to take the top off, that he could be a kind of guy that not only would be one-and-done, but maybe could be pushed by somebody that would come in right away.
Sure. I mean, the tape on Torrey Smith last season is not good. It really isn't. And you can make a lot of excuses. Obviously, San Francisco was a very bad football team. Blaine Gabbert was horrific at quarterback. Colin Kaepernick was only slightly better. But while you say that, Torrey Smith was not good in his own right. He wasn't helping those guys. And the hope is that it was a hiccup in his career, and that he will regain what he once was in Baltimore. But you have to watch that. I mean, there's no guarantee he's going to be an impact player because he was one of the worst wide receivers in football. He was right there with Nelson Agholor last season. So he certainly has more on the resume than a player like Nelson has. But as far as where they were last season, very, very similar. And that's not good. So I don't think the Eagles go into it and say, we're done at this position. I think they know they have a really, really good player in Alshon Jeffrey. They know what Jordan Matthews is, and he could potentially help them if he's still here and a trade doesn't come to pass. But things are still up in the air, and no one's looking at Torrey Smith and saying, this guy is the answer.
Right.
They're just hopeful that he is.
Although I am predicting a big season from Torrey Smith. You heard it here first.
Well, I wish I was as high on Torrey as you are. Unfortunately, I watched too much of the film of him in San Francisco, and trust me, it was not good.
All right. Monster season. Sports Bash Live, 97.3 ESPN. Before we move to some of the other things Doug talked about, would you think if best player available is the way they go and the tight end Howard is there at 14, would they consider that?
You have to consider it.
I mean, is he that good that if he was there at 14, it would be that hard to pass up and you would figure something out with him and Ertz?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think he's going to be there, number one. So anytime you have a player who's projected to go above and he slips to you, you have to look at it and consider it. And I would certainly do it, and I always advocate taking the best player available. But, you know, that's a cliche. Everyone uses it. And the reality in this league is you sort of have people with comparable grades, and then you look at position, and that's where need comes into it. So I think at 14 there's going to be enough players at other positions of need to where they'd go in a different direction, but that would be awfully it would be something you have to consider, and you have to consider seriously, because that's a talented kid. But I look at Doug Peterson's offense, and look, last year, and it's by no means do they have anybody of O.J. Howard's talent level, but you could argue because the receivers were so bad that the Eagles' best personnel grouping would be two tight ends. And Doug rarely went to that. He likes using three wide receivers more so, and that was with Dorial Green-Beckham and Nelson Agholor, who struggled mightily. So I just don't think he feels comfortable with the two tight end setup, so I think it's very unlikely something like that would shake out.
John McMullen with us, our 97.3 ESPN Eagles insider. Let's move to the interior line, John. Peterson sounded like it's an open competition on the offensive line, the interior part of that line. But for you, who's the leader to be the starting left guard and starting center?
Well, as long as Jason Kelce's here, he's the leader to be the starting center. The question is he going to be here? Now everyone says yes, but I don't think there's any question that the Eagles are trying to trade Jason Kelce, and they would like to get something for him, and that still remains a significant possibility. Left guard, hey, this team wanted Isaac Seumalo to start at left guard last year as a rookie, and he got injured with the strained pectoral, and that set him back, and their hope is to get him on the field. And they want him to be the starting left guard or the starting center, depending if Kelce is here or not. So I think that's the one guy they want in the starting lineup. And then it's a competition. And whether it's Alan Barber, whether it's Chance Warmack, whether it's Stefan Wisniewski, they'll all have an opportunity.
Yeah, well, when I heard yesterday, and I'll play that clip for everybody, about Seumalo, it sounded like the way he was talking about him, that he almost viewed him as the I don't know, the utility guy, right? I mean, he sounded like, well, he can play all 5 positions. We like that. He's got versatility. It almost sounded like he didn't view him as a starter. Did you get that impression?
No, the Eagles.
But you hear what you know what I mean? Though the way he talked about him, kind of like,
yeah, he can. Well, I think they were very impressed with him when he was forced to play different positions last season. And they did like his versatility coming out of college. That was one of the things they were very high on. They see him as ultimately the starting center when Jason Kelce is gone. The question is, does that happen this season or does it happen next season? And ultimately, that will be his long-term position. I think they want him on the field, though. And if Jason's going to be here this year, they'll start him at left guard, and then they'll kick him inside the center. But I think eventually he's going to be the starting center of this team. But, yeah, certainly they love his versatility, and he was forced to play even right tackle at the end last year because they had so many injuries, and he held down the fort pretty well, and that's what he was talking about. He's very, very impressed. But, hey, this team has always wanted Isaac Seumalo to be a starter from day one, and he's going to be a starter unless injury creeps up again somewhere, and it's going to be left guard or it's going to be center.
Yeah. He said he was like, take out Jason Peters and Lane Johnson. The rest of the guys, we like their versatility. They can move around the line. But he kind of singled Seumalo out as a guy who can play everywhere, and you're like, are you viewing him as kind of like the new Allen Barbary, that you could play everywhere, but you're not good enough to really be the guy? That was kind of like what I was kind of scratching my head out there for a little bit, because I agree with you. I thought that they liked him to be a starting level player. And then, of course, they signed Warmack. They brought back Wisniewski, too. So it seems like there's a lot of competition and versatility.
And that's why we say they can talk all they want about wanting Jason Kelce, but you don't bring in all these guys if you're not looking to do some things. And, the Eagles had a lot of injuries on the offensive line. It's good to have depth. There's no question about it. But you don't need 4 players for 2 positions on the interior of the offensive line. And that's what the Eagles have right now. In Kelce, Wisniewski, Seumalo, and Barber. They have 4 guys fighting for those 2 spots that are supposed to be, at least if you listen to Howie Roseman, integral parts of this team. And that's just not realistic to building a roster in the NFL, because come game day, you can only really dress 7, and you have 1 interior backup and 1 swing tackle. So why do you want veteran players in those particular positions? The answer is they want to move Jason Kelce.
Your take on Mixon and at 14 or whatever, if he slips to the second round, do the Eagles feel like a team that would take him?
Yeah, but not at 14. No way at 14. And I don't think they'll have to take him at 14. He's a tremendously talented running back, and I think he will go in the second round ultimately, but there's too many, obviously, public relations hurdles for the issues he got into at college. And the video, which is ugly, it's going to be a concern for all teams. He would have been in the first round conversation if he didn't have that problem. But there's no way the Eagles could take him in 14. I think the only running back in the conversation for Philadelphia at that position is going to be Christian McCaffrey.
Interesting name there. We'll talk more draft, more NFL, of course, every day at this time. John McMullen at JF McMullen on Twitter, FanRag Sports NFL, and, of course, all your Eagles news and notes at 97.3 ESPN.com. John, have a great night, pal.
Hey, you too. Thanks, guys.